September 11th, 2001. America had an intimate brush with death and devastation. Pillars of American strength, the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, were annihilated in an act of terrorism producing shock waves through the entire world. Americans had never experienced grief on this level before. This nation will never be the same again. September 11th, 2002, the first anniversary of the World Trade Center disaster. Along with grieving family members, media and visitors are flocking to pay tribute at Ground Zero. American flags pepper the scene with patriotism. Union Square, September 11th, 2002. People gather together to remember, to share grief, and to express thoughts on world peace. There are letters pinned to boards which say that peace conquers all. Coney Island Avenue, September 11th, 2002. The Pakistani Muslim community of Coney Island Avenue has rallied together for peace and solidarity. They do so through American and Pakistani flags flying in unison. On this anniversary day, the New York Post carries a headline, "Lest we forget." Lest we forget the grief of lost loved ones, the deadened spirit of a proud nation, the tragedy and suffering of those left behind. Lest we forget the unheard stories, the people whose voices went missing, the quiet suffering of those trapped and later unearthed.
My name is Bhajan Shastri. I am a priest of Hindu Samaj temple in Hamilton. I'm here from 22nd of May 1993 and I'm working here. So I'm working in this temple from last 9 years, I told already. And in this room we are in the temple. This is my room. I used to live here from my first day and I love this place. So this is my kitchen. I used to make my supper over here and you can see my small clones and my oil, my shower and our sink, and these are our clothes. Everything is gone, but I'm hoping that future will be all right.
This is just more of the cultural awareness, more of cultural ignorance, you can almost say. It happened on September 15th, 2001. It was a Saturday. My name is Priya Sharma. I was born in Hamilton, and I've been attending the Hindu Samaj since I was about 6 months old. This is the main prayer hall, which actually got the most damage. From the right, we have the aisle where Lord Ganesha is. The next is where we had the Ramchandra family. And on the last, over there, we had Shivji.
they're there anymore?
No, they're not there anymore. They actually, we immersed the idols into the water of the Hamilton Harbor.
Actually, it was going very quiet from last 9 years, but on September 15th, early morning, somebody knocked my door and told me that your next door building is burning. And I saw that it's my own building, not somebody else.
About 4:30 in the morning, these people had come in, and from the front, they broke the glass and actually spilled paint in there. And because paint is flammable, they were able to light the temple on fire from the front. And from there, just the blaze kind of went through the whole temple.
Mosques and places of worship perceived to be mosques suffered September 11th related backlash violence. Corporate media found 104 bias incidents reported against places of worship during the first week after September 11th. On November 19th, 2001, 4 teenagers burned down the Gobind Sadan, a multi-faith worship center in Oswego, New York, claiming the worshippers were supporters of Osama bin Laden. On March 25, 2002, a man who stated to police that he hated Muslims crashed his pickup truck into a mosque in Tallahassee, Florida, 30 minutes after evening prayers. On August 24, 2002, federal authorities announced they had discovered a plan by a doctor in Tampa Bay to bomb and destroy approximately 50 mosques and Islamic cultural centers in South Florida. The doctor's home contained rocket launchers, sniper rifles, and 20 live bombs.
They are so innocent. They don't know about who is Hindu, who is Muslim, who is Sikh, or who is Christian. They just follow the color, and whatever they want to, they do like that.
The Hindu Samaj temple in Hamilton was burned down in an act of hate crime when mistaken for a mosque on September 15, 2001. On the same day, Balbir Singh Sodhi, a 49-year-old turbaned Sikh and father of 3, was shot and killed while planting flowers at his gas station in Mesa, Arizona. Hours before the crime, Sodhi's alleged killer, Frank Roque, had bragged at a local bar of his intention to, quote, kill the ragheads responsible for September 11th. In addition to shooting Sodhi 3 times before driving away, Roque also allegedly shot into the home of an Afghani American and at 2 Lebanese gas station clerks.
My name is Yuri Kochiyama, and I was born in San Pedro in 1921, which makes me 81 years old now. Before World War II, when I was a teenager, which would be like in the 1930s, I was very apolitical. I really didn't know hardly anything that was happening in the world, even though there was, I think, already fighting in Europe. Hitler was moving across Europe. Before Pearl Harbor, I was just absolutely red, white, and blue American. I thought this was such a great country.
December 7th, 1941, the U.S. naval fleet based out of Pearl Harbor is bombed by the Japanese air fleet.
And nobody was sure what this would mean, that with Japan bombing Pearl Harbor, which we didn't even know was in Hawaii, that we knew that this was going to change everybody's life.
The nation encounters death and devastation.
We suddenly found ourselves engaged in a mortal struggle with an enemy who could be counted on for nothing except bitter and fanatic opposition.
The governor and I both spoke to the president earlier.
On December 8th, the president asked Congress to declare a state of war.
And their message that they gave us, just to simplify it, is that we're going to fight back.
My name is Roy Toshiro. Tsuji. December 7th, 1941 was famous for infamous Pearl Harbor attack, and we didn't even know what that meant even. But all of a sudden it changed our whole lives, and overnight things changed. Everybody recognized you as being Japanese, you're the enemy, and that's when things start to pop.
Yuri Kochiyama had just returned from dropping her Sunday school students home as Pearl Harbor was being bombed.
And I took each of them home and then came home.
Her desire was war with the United States. The peace talks now appear to have been just a subterfuge. Japan has attacked Pearl Harbor from the air.
And I wasn't at home but a few minutes when I see three tall men, I see them through the window, that they're in front of our door. And so as soon as they knocked, I went to the door and they asked if there were Seiichi Nakahara living there. And I said, oh yes, that's my father, and he's very sick. He just came back from the hospital yesterday. And he said, where is he? What room? And I pointed the room. They came right in, showed me their FBI cards, and went to where my father was sleeping and woke him up, told him to put on his bathrobe and slipper, and they went right out. I didn't have a chance to even ask them, where are they taking him and why? He was one of 1,300 Isseis, first generation Japanese that were taken in the first 48 hours.
To execute all previously prepared plans for the defense of the United States.
As Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy, I have directed that all measures be taken for our defense.
Our grief has turned to anger, and anger to resolution. Whether we bring our enemies to justice or bring justice to our enemies, justice will be done.
First, the curfew. We had curfew only for the Japanese, and then the confiscation of cameras and guns and radios. None of us own guns anyway, but businesses were taken away, and everybody's lives were at a standstill.
Well, the United States has demanded the policies that have forced thousands of men to be standing in line outside this federal building and required that they register, that they come down here and have their pictures taken, have their fingerprints taken, and be interrogated simply because they come from the wrong side of the global track.
January 21st, they called and said they're bringing my father back, and we were happy. We said, gee, they're letting him out. They knew he was dying, and so he was brought back in an ambulance with a nurse. We wondered if he could talk. He couldn't seem to talk, and we would wave our hands before his eyes. He didn't seem to make any response, so I don't know if he could see, and well, he couldn't talk, and we didn't know if he could hear, and he was, I don't know how many, he was just down to look like he was skin and bones, like 70, 80 pounds or so. Well, the nurse stayed in the room he was in, and the next morning she woke us up and said that he had passed on.
We just recently found this letter I've written when I was quite young, explaining all the things about discrimination and what happened during the evacuation. Evacuation is a word we used then, but today we call it expulsion. But whatever it is, words are words, I guess. The government issued an edict that the Japanese be given 24 hours notice to vacate the West Coast area to approximately 100 miles to the interior, and proclaimed us as enemy aliens. But for me, as a kid, I thought it was quite an adventure. I had never been on a train, but the first realization my whole life is going to change was the first day of work.
Roy's father chose for his family to work on designated farms rather than go to the internment camps.
They didn't have any proper housing or anything. They had wheat granaries and everything else converted into sleeping quarters and everything. And first night I was tired, I slept. The next morning I had somebody wake me up suddenly, and everything was dark out there. And all my brothers and father, and they've gone to work ahead of me. And they said, why weren't you out there? And that's when I realized that a new life is going to start. And from that day on, 18 hours a day, and forced labor. If you're a kid, you're the chore boy. And what that exactly means is you do all the chores, like feed the pigs, milk the cows, clean out the barn and everything. And then you go in with the men and eat, and then go out with them to work. So you work longer than they do. It kept on, and I was quite an angry kid, so I worked hard. The harder I worked, it worked off all that frustration, I guess. But I was good for the farmer.
About the 1st of April, there was an announcement that all people of Japanese ancestry would be evacuated, and anyone who was part Japanese would be evacuated. We could take only what we could carry, and so most people brought beddings, sheets and blankets and some clothes. I know they told us, don't bring anything you're not going to use, but then I think all of us, we thought what was important were pictures of friends and family. I know I put some pictures away.
Some were given as little as 48 hours to sell all their belongings, incurring losses estimated in the billions of dollars as they quickly sold their homes, businesses, and other goods well below market value.
Terminal Island, it was so sad. They threw away almost everything that was Japanese, thinking that might make it harder for them. And Terminal Island had the best collection of Japanese dolls, but they threw them all in the ocean, I heard.
Over 120,000 Japanese were incarcerated. The mass removal took 8 months to complete.
They're smiling because they're supposed to smile when they're in front of a camera, but really it was more serious than that.
We were so unprepared. We did not fight it. We didn't even know what to do. They cannot keep doing this racial profiling. Too many families have been broken up. Families don't even know where their father or brother or uncle has been taken away. It's the kind of thing that the rest of us here must stop.
I enjoy most music, but actually classical music is what I enjoy most. Enjoy listen to the operas when they come on. My name is Grace Tucker. I am 100 years old. I was born May the 28th in 1902.
Grace Tucker, along with some others, protested against the Japanese internment and decided to join and help them in the camps.
I went to Japan to study language and customs for 3 years and came back just before the war started. When war broke out, we stayed with the Japanese, and when the government moved them into the interior, we went with them. And of course there were no facilities, but they were cold and miserable. So it wasn't any picnic.
Welcome to our brand new registration center where we have everything set and ready for you.
May 13th, 1942. 45-year-old Ichiro Shimoda, a Los Angeles gardener, is shot dead by guards while trying to escape from Fort Still, Oklahoma, enemy alien internment camp. The victim was seriously mentally ill, having tried suicide twice since being picked up on December 7th. He is shot despite the guards' knowledge of his mental state.
Welcome to your new home. You'll feel like you never even left society.
July 27, 1942. Raleigh, California farmer Toshiro Kobata and San Pedro fisherman Hirota Isomura are shot dead by camp guards at Lordsburg, New Mexico enemy alien internment camp during an alleged escape. It would later be uncovered, however, that upon their arrival to the camp, the men had been too ill to walk from the train station to the camp gate. October 20th, 1942. President Roosevelt calls the relocation centers concentration camps at a press conference. The War Relocation Authority had consistently denied that the term concentration camps accurately described the conditions of the camps. May 7th, 1945. The surrender of Germany ends the war in Europe. August 6th, 1945. The atomic bomb is dropped on Hiroshima. 3 days later, a second bomb is dropped on Nagasaki.
I thought it was so cute. Angry little Asian girl. Though she doesn't look angry enough, she looks like she's smiling.
What is she doing with her hands?
Oh. But how would you describe that sign when they do that? What does it mean? Here, I'm so stupid.
Giving the finger.
What? What does it mean?
Giving the finger, right?
Oh, giving the finger.
Present day. New York City.
It's my message to the new immigrants to America that be peaceful, try to be like a nice citizen, and prove yourselves like a good person. My name is Alex Goldsmith, and I'm here 2 years before. We heard before that USA is a land of a dream, land of opportunity, but regret to say after that incident.
Alex Goldsmith has chosen not to reveal his real name. A member of the civil rights movement in his home country, he came to the United States to escape persecution at home. Many immigrants come to the U.S. because of volatile political conditions in their home countries. They come for the freedom and democracy that America promises. Many come from poverty, economic strife, and war-stricken conditions.
My name is Shastri Yagi. I'm a mother of 3. I've been married to my husband for almost 10 years now, and I came to the United States from Afghanistan after the war over there, or during the war over there. I grew up here in Albany. This is Juanes. He's 7 years old.
Yeah.
And he has his teeth falling out. Oh. And this is Ziad. He's 9. And that's Abudat.
No!
5. Life in Albany is peaceful. It's a small city. So, I grew up here. I know it. This is where I couldn't call anywhere else home other than here. My family's here. I went to school here. My husband basically spent his whole adult life here.
Alex Goldsmith was at home when he heard a knock on his door. He was reported as a suspicious character by a neighbor in his apartment building.
I heard a knock, so my door was locked. So when I unlocked and I look outside. There are 4 or 5 guys without uniform, undercover. They said that we hear that your door is always open. I said, no, you see when you knocked, it was locked. They didn't hear me. They just pushed me inside and entered. They rushed inside and they ordered me, stay outside.
Alex and his brother, who had arrived home from work, waited outside while their house was searched without a warrant.
My husband, he is very outspoken. He speaks his mind. He's a very good husband. He's an excellent father. He's, I guess, one of those men who were meant to have 3 boys just to rough around with. And he worked very hard for everything that we had.
8:45 Eastern Time, plane crash into the foremost of those towers.
After 7 to 8 hours, we came to know by that authorities that we are terrorists. I said, what are you saying? What you find inside? When they rush in my apartment, eventually they ordered by their hires that these guys should be cuffed and handed over to the local police stations. So they put our hand back with the handcuffs. They treated us as a criminal and they put us in a criminal cells and they started their investigations.
If in fact a precinct actually got a call from a citizen that they had some Arab males that were new to an area, the police department might do a little checking in the neighborhood, try to confirm that initial complaint. Then they would refer that to the terrorism task force to say it appears that the information is correct and we have some of these names.
My husband, he was detained for 3 days before he was able to make any phone calls to a lawyer or to a family member or anything like that. It was basically, he was picked up off the street and just taken away, and that was it. No one knew anything about it.
The Pacific area. The facts of yesterday and today speak for themselves.
So they started their investigations. The INS officer came to me. He said that, gentlemen, we will not provide you lawyers because this is not a criminal, this is a civil case.
I was in Jordan and everything was fine. I mean, I hadn't heard from him calling me.
Around the world, I never seen a person who involved in a civil case and they're treating like a criminals. Handcuff, belly chain, food chain.
And he hadn't called for a few days. And all of a sudden his brother called and he asked for me, and it was awkward because, you know, we don't really speak that much. And then he just said, I'm just calling to let you know that Ali has been detained for questioning, but he called me, but he should be fine, and everything will be okay because he didn't do anything wrong. They're just picking up everyone to question them.
Since 9/11, the FBI and INS began illegally detaining Arabs, South Asians, Muslims, and Sikhs, rounding up over 1,200 in the first weeks of the crackdown. The government has yet to disclose the detainees' names, where they are being held, and on what charges. Those released report many more Arabs in detention, leading experts to believe unknown thousands are being detained.
So I didn't really think much of it. I said, okay, they're questioning, that's fine. Then, you know, he should be out within a day or two, because how long can questioning take? You know, and now I found out it was so amazingly horrible that, you know, no one, I mean, no one should go through that.
We spent in a detention like a couple of months. And the condition which we observed inside is, of course, not good experience.
He was held in solitary confinement, or as they call it, the special housing unit, where in that particular cell area that they keep you, from what I was told, it's a 6x9 cell, and it has a tiny little window that you can look out from because you're in there 23 hours a day, sometimes 24. And the window that he had to look outside to see whether it was day or night or the season, if you want to even say, because since he was in there all of fall, all of winter, and all of spring, they painted it on him, and apparently to all the other inmates as well, so that they couldn't look outside to see anything. He was videotaped 24 hours a day, so he had absolutely no privacy. The light was shone on him 24 hours a day.
Many detainees have reported that they were mistreated while in custody. This included humiliating body searches, confinement in cold cells without blankets or shoes, and in some cases, being drenched with cold water by guards. As the jails filled, some were taken to detention centers out of state, far from families and attorneys.
That was very cool place, like free zones. So I complained many times that this is the month of June and we are in a freezing zones. Give me some kind of blanket. They said, oh, we are not supposed to ask. And they curse us. They not consider us human. They consider that we are animals.
Most of these men were very, very religious, and they were given pork to eat, which is against their religion to eat.
At the San Diego Metropolitan Correctional Center, the court filings say, quote, defendant, who is an observant Muslim, was not allowed to have a Quran. For 5 days, he was denied Muslim halal food, which conforms to specific dietary laws. He was not allowed a shower for the first 3 or 4 days and was not allowed to have toilet paper or soap for the first 2 days. For 2 days, his cell floor was flooded with water, preventing him from kneeling and praying.
There may be some bumps in the road. That's life. Everything doesn't end like it does in the soaps, you know. I don't actually know how it ends in the soaps because I don't watch it.
My name is Saleh Hamzi. I'm a victim of September 11. We are detainees for the INS.
They just pick people up and just leave them here. They don't even come over here and tell us nothing.
I wish, you know, we can deliver this message to all the public, to all the people.
People have been over here trying to kill themselves because they want to go home. You got guys that just came off the boat and they want to go. I just had to save a guy's life the other day because he tried to kill himself.
I will let everybody know that we are suffering over here. I want to say, please, I'm a father of 7 months. A baby. I don't see my baby yet. So, thank you for everything, and that's it.
If you were interested in somebody but didn't have enough evidence to charge them with anything, could the INS be helpful by detaining them on an immigration violation until you're ready to say we're interested in this guy or we're not?
If we have somebody that gets stopped and detained by INS, there's a number of things that we might do before we even went to interview him. So in that regard, we would probably say, yes, INS, we have an interest in this particular individual.
But the result is sometimes the INS may be holding somebody longer than they would because the FBI is saying, hang on, we're still looking into this person.
Well, I guess that's a distinct possibility.
Thousands of men and teenage boys face deportation after complying with the new national registration program targeting individuals from over 25 predominantly Muslim countries labeled terrorist by the U.S. government. U.S. officials say they may eventually expand this tracking program to other immigrants. Lest we forget the unheard stories, the people whose voices went missing, the quiet suffering of those trapped and later unearthed.
My husband was kept in solitary confinement for 6 months. After the 6 months, when the FBI were finished investigating him and found nothing that he had any connections to the terrorist attacks, he was deported. He was deported on June 24th. But nobody told us that my husband was being deported. He was just secretly taken away and sent away, basically.
In June of 2002, the Justice Department secretly deported 131 Pakistanis who had been held at INS detention centers around the country. None of the detainees had been charged with terrorism-related crimes. This was to be one in a series of mass deportations of Muslim men from different countries who were herded like cattle secretly in the dead of night and deported back, supposedly to their respective countries. Their family and friends were not notified, and the deportations were often bungled. The deportees have been known to be dropped off in countries nowhere close to their native land, and disappearances under the guise of deportations is not uncommon. How much have we changed in 50 years? The internment camps have taken a quieter form, detention centers. Yet, as the world gets smaller and smaller, mass removal takes on a much larger scale. One woman's story is significant in revealing the reality and attitudes of today's global climate.
My name is Berna Cruz. I came to Canada in 1994. I've been living in Toronto since 1994 with my 2 kids. I went to India after 6 years to visit my parents. I left Toronto on the 2nd of January via Chicago. I was in India for 3 weeks.
Returning to Toronto from India, Berna went through customs at the Chicago O'Hare Airport on a routine 1-hour stopover.
That's when they held me there saying that I was carrying a fake passport.
Berna stood in line and went through the routine motion one goes through when crossing borders on an international flight.
And then the next line was me. So I gave the passport, he flipped through the pages. He asked me, so you're also flying to Toronto? And I said yes. And he goes, how come so many people are going to Canada these days?
Here at the Peace Arch Canada-US border, the number of political asylum refugee claims have risen sharply. In November 2001, 5% of the asylum seekers were Pakistani. In February of 2002, 49% were Pakistani. Most of the surge of asylum seekers coincided with America's new registration program for men over the age of 15 who were in the United States on visitor, student, or business visas. Within days, it became clear to foreigners that anyone registering who had overstayed a visa would be immediately put into deportation proceedings. Hardworking families, would-be refugees who fled to the U.S. from volatile conditions in their home countries, are now fleeing their American homes, camped out in Salvation Army shelters and other lodgings along the border, waiting for appointments to apply for asylum and struggling to find money to pay the bond to get their male relatives out of immigration detention.
And he goes, oh, this picture looks very funky. So I thought maybe he was just, kidding around. So I was just standing there nodding my head. So at that point he asked me, do you know what a loonie is? So I told him it's $1. And he goes, so what is the other word for $2? So I told him it's a toonie. And this officer goes, well, she has taken enough of lessons. She has taken good lessons to give answers. One of the other officers goes, no, she knows all about currency. So that means, do we just let her go? And he goes, no, we'll have to take her inside. As I walk into the room, all I could see is all skin-colored people in there, like a few Indian men, Chinese, and a couple of Arab men sitting there. They started questioning me with the same questions, whether I bought the passport from somebody And I told them, I said, before you start accusing me of all these things, can I make a call to the Canadian embassy? And he goes, no. So, I thought maybe I wasn't allowed to make a call. So I said, can you please call the Canadian embassy? And then they will be able to tell you if this is a valid Canadian passport or not. And he goes, just shut up or we'll throw you in jail. Do you want to end up in jail? They said, the place you come from, are there any this terrorist thing going on there? And I said, there's nothing. I just went to see my dad who was sick. He was telling me, 10 minutes left, 5 minutes left. And towards the end, he rushed and brought all these documents to be signed. And I asked him, what is all this? Before I could sign, I would like to know. And he goes, just shut up and sign because the flight will leave in 2 minutes. Just shut up and sign it. So I signed it.
Upon signing the documents, the conditions imposed by the government officials quickly changed.
So before they took me out of the room, they said, we are giving you 2 options. Do you want to tell us the truth or do you want to end up in jail? And then the other one goes, no, it's 2 options, whether she wants to end up in jail or whether she wants to take the flight home.
Berna was whisked away to a departure gate.
I've read so many articles after the September 11th. Innocent victims have been arrested and sent to jails and families not knowing the whereabouts. So thinking of my 2 kids, I said I would take the flight home. And when I said I would take the flight home, they said, didn't we tell you right from the start that you were guilty? That's why you opted to take the flight home. So midway through the flight, the captain came and asked me what went wrong. So I told him actually what went wrong, and he said, I'm an Arab national holding a Canadian passport. So he goes, I did verify your passport and my passport. There's nothing wrong with your passport. I don't know why they did this, but are you aware what they did to your passport? I said no. And that's when he told me that they cut my passport and stamped each and every page of my passport. So I said, if they have cancelled my Indian visa, how am I supposed to go to India? And he goes, I know you're not at fault and we will help you get some help from the Canadian embassy.
Because of Berna Cruz and others who were targeted on accounts of racial profiling by the U.S. government, the Canadian government issued an official warning to its citizens against travel to America during this time of high alert.
They just decided on that, okay, this is what they're going to do. They didn't want to hear anything further. No matter what names they have, what nationalities they are, they should go through the proper channels and not do things based on their power, and I don't want anybody else to go through this.
What's this?
This, yeah, masjid.
It's masjid. Whose is it?
Allah.
Allah? No, but whose is this? Whose was this?
Baba's.
Yeah. Grandpa's? My younger 2 children, they're 7 and 5. They don't know that, any of the reasons as to what has happened. I've tried to explain to my oldest one what happened just so, he's going to hear it in school, things like that. I didn't want him to be upset over it. But he can't comprehend the reasoning behind it. I mean, he understands that he was, why he was taken in and things like that, but he doesn't understand what it has to do with us, what it has to do with his father, because he knows his father's innocent. My children hasn't seen their father, and he hasn't seen them, or us, all of us haven't been together for 15 months now, and that's 2 birthdays for each one of them that has passed that he hasn't seen. And I don't know, maybe this will be at one day, it'll be an experience that I can say, okay, well, I've had that experience, now I know how to deal with it. I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy though. It's horrible.
I like New York very much, better than the other city of the world, because it looks like a dreamland. Particularly, I like the east side and west side of the New York. Particular, both sides are rivers, and I want to sit there. I want to see the natural life. I want to see the birds flying freely in the airs above the waters. Then I am realizing that what is a freedom and what is a free things. So you can fly here, you can fly down, you can fly up, you can fly north, east, south, wherever you want.
by the show of what the major demonstrations have been about, against the war. There were placards that said, "Stop racial profiling, no more detainments of Mideast people." I think people are much more sensitive and more informed at this time than they were back then 60 years ago.
Not by our mouths will we let fear silence us. Not by our hearts will we allow whole peoples or countries to be deemed evil. Not by our will and not in our name. We pledge resistance. We pledge alliance with those who have come under attack.
It's not just statistics and it's not just numbers, it's actual names and lives that are being affected by this.
I think there are many Americans who are fed up with all the unrighteous things that America has done, and I think they will support the South Asian and Easterners, and they are also tired of U.S. getting them involved in wars.
On behalf of my husband and my 3 children, I am now here to fight for my husband's right. I'm here to fight for my children's right. I am here to fight for my life.
Wars and how these horrible things done by 1 or 2 people can destroy millions and millions of lives. I think the statistics are that if 1 person is killed, at least 10 people are immediately affected by it. All these people who have been detained and deported, 10 more people or maybe even more have been affected by this and their lives have been turned upside down.
We pledge to make common cause with the people of the world to bring about justice, freedom, and peace.
In March 2003, with the beginning of America's war on Iraq, a new wave of bias crimes occurred. In Indianapolis, an Afghan American was severely injured after 2 people burst into his restaurant and set him on fire. Projectiles were fired at a mosque in Chicago. Graffiti in San Jose University warned that Muslims would be shot. And in New Jersey, a Pakistani man was beaten unconscious by 2 white men, screaming profanities about Islam. The question arises, who becomes America's enemy next? Lest you forget, I will repeat myself. Your ignoring me does not make me go away. I am part of you, a limb, your roots, and I will repeat myself to get attention, to be acknowledged. I am a shame, and your silence will not disappear me. I will repeat myself until you deal with me. Coney Island Avenue, September 11th, 2002. It has become extremely important for Muslim communities in America to justify their patriotism. Waving a flag is the most direct way. On this day, the Pakistani community remembers the tragedy through placards which strongly reproach terrorism, simultaneously raising awareness of their community, which has been highly and unjustly targeted by the INS. Numerous members of the community have left the country in humiliation and in fear.
उनके सामने आज जो पाकिस्तानी कम्युनिटी ने इतने जानदार तरीके से इजहार यकजहती के तौर पे ये मुजाहरा किया, इसकी भी उन्हें समझ आनी चाहिए कि ये कम्युनिटी जो है ये पीस लविंग कम्युनिटी है। हम किसी भी इनोसेंट आदमी के खिलाफ कोई भी कम्युनिटी जब काम करे उसकी मरम्मत करते हैं। उसके साथ साथ जो हमारे
The security of the country is very important, yes, but innocence is very important too, on the other hand.
There has been so much of racial profiling, the Arabs, the Muslims, the Sikhs, and South Asians.
Whatever their ancestry is, anybody that looked a little different were targets. And that kind of reminds me of our own situation, and we had to stop it.
Keep talking about world peace and being a loving, you know, country, things like that. It has to start sometimes. And I think that, you know, it's really time.
We should not do this to each other. And we should live peacefully in this world, because this is such a nice world for the human being.
As we are learning, much of the grief over Tuesday's terrorist attacks is turning to anger. People are unfairly retaliating against people they believe are from the Middle East. Someone shot and killed a Mesa, Arizona man.
Balbir Singh Sodhi had heard there were threats, told his family, stay home. It's not worth getting killed. But he, there has been fear, went to work. And a black pickup truck with the gunman inside stopped just 5 feet away from Balbir. Did he see his death coming?
I never had any feeling of being an alien in this country.
He took his gun and shoot 3 times to him. He was dead. He was dead.
And you know, they were just
Somebody called me.
about us, and I looked in his eyes, and you know, it's like he just didn't even want to see that I'm a human being.
20,000 dead, you pieces of shit. Go back home.
It is claustrophobic to some extent. It is shocking. It is just
Is there hell, or are we in hell when this happens?
Hi, Daddy.
I'm an American. Go ahead, arrest me and let those terrorists run wild.
I lost my uncle, but I don't want anybody else to lose their uncle because it's really hard. And I can't go to school because I'm scared. I'm scared to go to my house.
FBI came to my house and started interrogating me. He started asking me if I knew any Arabs, if I pray, if I do this and that. You know, I mean, it's pathetic. You know, it's just pathetic. And I think all the people.
But just because you wear a turban doesn't mean you're a terrorist.
People on campus are still coping with the act.
Turning fear into rage.
Into this country for a better life for me, not to have me live in